All right. I would like to welcome everybody to the March 21st edition of the OpenSSF's Vulnerability Disclosure Working Group. I am Krobe. I will be our tour guide for today. I posted a link to our agenda in the chat. If you have any opens you'd like to talk about, please key them in while we work through some business. First of all, as is tradition here, do we have any new friends, people that haven't attended this meeting before, that wanted to introduce themselves to the group?
Hi, my name's Shelby Cunningham, she, her pronouns. I work at Github, and lately I've been more interested in reaching out to other folks in the vulnerability space, and it's nice to meet all of you.
Excellent. Well, welcome, Shelby. We're glad to have you.
Hi,
Any
everyone.
other new friends?
Yes.
Please,
Hi,
Lorenzo.
everyone. I'm Lorenzo De Carli. I'm assistant professor of computer science at Worcester Polytechnic in Massachusetts. I do research on open source security, and I sort of gravitate around a couple of groups in the OSSF because, common interests, and I hope to be able to talk later about a project of mine that may be of interest to some folks here.
Excellent. Well, welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else interested in saying hello?
Yeah, I'll say hello as well. My name is Christine Abernathy, and I lead the open source program office at F5. So we just recently joined OSSF, and I'm just kind of like here just to learn more about what's going on in the different working groups.
Excellent. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Anyone else new wanted to say hello?
I'll say hello as well. I'm so glad to hear so many new people here. My name is Paul Da Silva. I've been with IBM a long time, currently with product security operations. I lead the source code disclosure program, as well as the secure lifecycle program. I'm here to help and learn and see if my skills align with the ask here.
Excellent. Welcome, Paul. Any other new friends?
All right. Hi, my name's Olivia. I'm a student at RIT, and I'm hoping to do an independent study with OpenSSF over the summer. I'm studying computer science, security, and I'm part of the open source minor.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Olivia. Glad to have you. Anyone else before we get started? All right, before we jump into opens, I have two business matters to talk about. First off is I got the awesome action item from the OpenSSF Technical Advisory Committee to go review their backlog and try to remediate a bunch of issues. And one of those issues was reviewing the working group charters. So I would love it if I can assign everybody homework over the next week. If you could take a look at our working group charter, there's a link there. Provide us any feedback, and then we can try to officially get that ratified so that kind of procedural item is taken care of and in our rear view window. Any questions about that item?
Where is there?
There is a link in our meeting agenda. It's in our GitHub repo. Do you have that up?
I do. Thank you.
All right. You're very welcome. Any other questions or comments?
Are you looking for sort of anything that crosses our mind, or are you specifically interested in some type of feedback?
I would like to know if anyone has any strong feelings about what is worded there. The charters are fairly consistent between the working groups. We are allowed to make changes if we want to, but I need to just kind of as a point of order, need to get that moved forward because it kind of slipped through the cracks over the years. So if you have strong feelings, please give us a comment. Otherwise, just let me know you had an opportunity to review it. All right, our next businessy thing. Yes, please, Vicky, I'm sorry.
It's not a pull request, it doesn't look like. So is there an issue where people should put their comments?
Yes, there is. And I will go to our issue tracker. It is issue 106. You could just comment there.
Okay.
If you have no feedback, but general concurrence, if you could note that, that'd be great.
Second thing, could we put some time boxing around this so we don't just keep saying the same thing every 2 weeks, saying, hey, don't forget to look at the.
I would like feedback by the end of this week. That way, if there's any big changes I have to make, I can get that done before our next meeting in 2 weeks. Thank you. Appreciate that. That's good organization. All right, second point of order before we move into the fun stuff. I've had several requests from members that are interested to potentially move this meeting time. So if the group in general agrees to that, I'll send out a doodle that we can try to find a time that is agreeable. We have some folks from Europe that aren't able to participate that would like to. But I know we also have some folks from the West Coast of the States. So that's going to be an interesting little puzzle to work out. Does anyone have any feedback on that?
Sorry, I seem to be the one to keep having. So I know that a lot of us participate in a lot of other cross time zone things. And unfortunately, that means that we have certain blocks of time that are always full because of it, as I'm sure a lot of you know. So on the West Coast, our mornings are always blocks. We can speak with people in Europe and Asia. So if it turns out that we do have people who wish to participate, but scheduling doesn't work out, would it make sense to have multiple groups for different time zones? I don't know whether that's something we've considered in the past.
That is an option for us. If we have a big bifurcation of time, we could potentially split things up into focus groups if one particular group wanted to work on a special project. And yes, so that is an option if we wanted to have 2 sessions. That becomes a bit cumberplex for some of us, but we can work that out. And what I would do before we make any changes is we would send out a doodle to the mailing list, give everyone time to vote what times worked out best for them or what times didn't work out. And then we would try to find the best consensus for a time. Jeffrey, you had a comment, question?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Just some of the other working groups alternate every other meeting to make it a bit more friendlier to Asia Pac versus EMEA. So that's another option.
Yeah, that's an excellent feedback I had forgotten about. Thank you. Any other feedback? Please.
We also would have some confirmation bias going on with asking the people who are actually able to make it to this call. So are we doing the outreach on the mailing list or Slack or anything like that?
I will be doing that, yes.
Okay.
Several of the people that aren't here asked me to change the time, and I said I can't do that without getting enough critical mass to do that. But yes, I will plan on sending it out to the mailing list. We'll put a deadline on the doodle, but it sounds like we have some options. I'll also so I'll send an email with a couple suggestions that we've detailed here, alternating times, 2 different meetings, keeping it the same. And then I'll let folks kind of participate in that. And then we'll do a doodle if we decide we want to do a meeting time change. And that might also inform us on when potential alternating times might work out. Because I know we have some folks from Australia in particular that aren't able to participate regularly, especially as we go through time zone changes or daylight savings changes. All right. Any additional feedback? All right. Our first item, Vicky wanted to give us an update on SPDX.
So the past few calls, I've been letting you know that I'm trying to get that I am getting someone from Spdx Defects, which is their vulnerability disclosure type thing, to come and talk to us about what they're doing. And that is still happening, just very, very slowly. The person with whom I was speaking apparently went on vacation and I didn't know that. So just want to let you know that is still going on, but it'll happen eventually.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions on that topic before we move on? Right. I'm going to switch the order up a little bit since we have special guest Lorenzo and student here, Olivia. I would like to yield the floor to him to talk about his understanding the impact of aggressive vulnerability reports. Take it away, sir.
Thank you. And just to clarify, Olivia is not my student. She works on stuff which sounds very interesting, but I think she's here independently. My student, well, so to speak, my student is Abby, who's not really my student, is a student of a close collaborator of mine. Abby is also here, but I don't think she introduced herself. Abby, if you're still online, do you mind speaking up and introducing yourself? She may just be in spirit, but not in person. So, all right. So I guess I'll do this. I'll do the talking. So this came from an idea that was floated around in the other working group, the identifying security threats, and Mike Scovetta was the one, for those of you who know him, who brought this up. This sort of recurring pattern of observation that there is sort of an ecosystem of security researchers that report vulnerabilities to open source projects. And sometimes those reports may not be done. I'll try to be very careful with the wording here, in a way which is knowledgeable or respectful. Indeed, I think many people, probably many folk here in this very same group, have been exposed to vulnerability reports which are aggressive or have some type of sort of aggressiveness issue in the language, in the behavior, which doesn't really work well with the overall sort of open source community tradition. So we're trying to understand A, the extent of aggressive vulnerability reports, and B, the sort of the impact that they have on the people that and the organization that receive those reports. And the assumption here is probably that the impact is negative, but we would like to hear from people that are subjected to those. So we have already some ideas from various folk in OSSF of which specific forms those bug reports take. We've gone from like people having a realistic timeline, such as, I reported this bug a week ago, why isn't fixed? Or if you don't pay me, I'm gonna go public with this. Or to an extent also people that report things that are not really vulnerabilities, and a recurring one, for example, seems to be, hey, your code is on the web, for reporting this on open source project. So I'd be interested, A, in any idea from folks about what we should be looking into, and B, if you're interested in talking to us, or you want to propagate this information to anyone who may be interested in talking to us, this is all done anonymously, and you won't see the name on any report or things like that. But the conclusion we reach, we hope to be able to help the community with them. The long-term deliverable here will be helping organizations to produce better guidelines and maybe better community education, so that we don't go through this sort of unpleasant exercises of having to deal with this type of incidents.
It's very interesting and very timely. What does the group think about this? Any comments or feedback for everybody?
A couple things I'd share. This sounds like a really interesting project. I know this problem extends outside of open source, but there's some unique challenges that are introduced in open source. One great thing about us studying this in the context of open source, though, is perhaps we can create some kind of norms. So something that I've talked about a bit in this group in the past has been wanting to, and maybe this is related to some of the other things later on the agenda today, but wanting to have a bit more of a de facto standard, I guess, to what is included in a bug report to a vendor or to a project. And maybe if we had a bit of a higher informational bar, it might weed out some of this, not all of it, but maybe some of it. Because what I'm hearing anecdotally, like from projects, but from vendors too, is that in the last couple of years, as more people have gotten into bug bounty, there's been a lot of lower quality reports as well, where someone just uses some kind of automated tooling and they like try to shoot a bug over, often with expectation of a financial reward that maybe wasn't as normalized in the past as well. So I think there's cool work we could do in this group around norm setting. And obviously there's people here that work like in CV and things like that, that are better informed than me, that might be able to point us toward existing work in this space that we could perhaps leverage. I'm not sure. But I think setting some norms, setting some clear demarcations as well as to what is considered acceptable and unacceptable, because I think that a lot of that isn't well known.
Thank
What
you.
other
That's-
thoughts does the group have for Lorenzo?
Hey, this is Kayla. Hello. I work at HackerOne. First off, I think it's a great topic. One question, which I'm pretty sure I know the answer to, but might as well ask. This is you would be mostly interested / solely interested in talking to open source projects, right? Is that right, Lorenzo?
Well, I mean, we are kind of looking at open source because it's an easier access path. But we think this happens also with in the commercial in corporation space, and we are not sort of against looking at that space too. Mm-hmm. Maybe perhaps less of interest to this particular group, but we're certainly the phenomenon, I think, it's pretty universal across commercial and open source.
Absolutely. Okay. So first off, I'd love to connect at some point and get you connected with folks on our team that we might be able to hook you up with, because I'm sure there's lots of people with thoughts on this that would be helpful for you to talk with. And then also, are you looking from the researcher side of this as well, or are you focusing mostly on the receiver of the vulnerabilities first?
So we are looking more on the receiver because I think there's quite a bit of a body of research on the report themselves, because typically those are public or semi-public, so people have analyzed the language style. What's hard to get for us is the impact on the organization and even the people. Does it cause a higher burnout or things like? Because we think there could be a non-negligible negative effect on being sort of the constant receiving end of this type of thing. So yeah, we're more interested in the receiver for this particular study.
Great. Okay. Awesome. That works for me.
So
yeah, I'm not quite sure what the process is for connecting after the fact.
I'll leave my email address in the meeting minutes, and I also directly reach out to anyone who mentioned to be directly interested during the meeting.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayla. Any other comments or feedback?
Lorenzo, I just want to say it's nice to see somebody from my alma mater.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't know you were from WPI too, but yeah, nice to meet someone else.
Indeed.
Yes. Nice to make your acquaintance.
So while we are not directly as part of our next project, kind of going out and doing a survey of maintainers, we have as a group collectively talked about this issue in the very recent past, so much so that we, as Jennifer alluded to, our next project is trying to help set some norms and accepted practices for security researchers. So if I could, unless there's other feedback for Lorenzo, we can move on to our project. That sounds great. Let's move on. Okay.
Looks like that's the feedback. And I also want to just quickly add, I mean, we don't want to be just the people that come here and get a bunch of help and then never give anything back. So, we want to very much to sort of keep people in the loop and sort of be here to provide updates on where the work is going to go, and if hopefully we create anything that we can be of direct usefulness to the community of the people here, we'll make sure to come back and talk about that.
Yeah. We definitely have recognized this is an issue, a stressor for open source maintainers. So we decided last year, one of our projects was creating a coordinated vulnerability disclosure guide for software maintainers and open source software projects. And we felt a next endeavor might be useful is to create a companion piece focused on security researchers to try to help lay out some of what a good behavior or acceptable practice is within open source and trying to report and remediate vulnerabilities. I put a link in the agenda. So what I would like to do today would potentially be to brainstorm on sections or kind of do a straw man of what areas we'd like to talk about. And what you're looking at in the Google Doc is I copied over our existing document, cannibalized a couple of the sections and some of the words. So this is just a very draft starting point for us to look at and think about how we want to approach this problem. Right off the bat, thinking about coaching security researchers in how they can more effectively work with open source maintainers and projects. Does anyone have any ideas for topics that we should or should not cover in the guide?
Hi. I got a couple. How to get a CVE number. Also, like, not only how to get a CVE number, how to get a CVN number in the face of potential conflict with the maintainer. Like, what the processes what processes exist. For example, the CVE appeals process. Who can issue CVEs? Who are the easy CNAs? For example, like I really like using SNCC for but what the pitfalls of using various different CNAs may be, stuff like that. So yeah. I'm also happy to. I can't write it, but if somebody wanted to sit down and have a conversation with me, like I'm more than happy to like brain dump that into a section that could get written. I can't do the writing myself necessarily.
That's excellent. I appreciate that offer, Jonathan. I most definitely take you up on that. To kind of kickstart ideas, one of our earlier projects was kind of brainstorming on pain points between the different personas within open source software. And we have links to the which personas was it? The security, we have the maintainer and the finder personas. So a developer and a researcher persona. So I'm looking at our list here. I didn't see who got their hand up first. So Kayla or Jennifer, go ahead and provide your comment or feedback.
Kayla, feel free to go first.
Okay, that works. So I think one thing that would be helpful is, even though it seems redundant, would be a really high level overview of what is open source. It's kind of like that, the vulnerability report you get that says, hey, your stuff is out in the open. It's like, yes, well, it's open source. Just an explainer for researchers of what open source entails, and even a description of the folks, the community who work in open source. So that same, to kind of maybe drive up the empathy of, this is a volunteer group that is all about community, and just to get to know them a little bit. So I know that I did see who are open source maintainers, so that section for sure, but then also just what is open source.
And what's there is, again, just is mud on the wall for us to form into a beautiful piece of art. So it's not intended to be the final product. And then I think that's an excellent suggestion, Kayla. Jennifer.
This is pretty basic, but I feel it's often missing. So what types of things should be included in that initial bug report? Because often the handshake to get this stuff rolling is too many steps. It doesn't need to be this way. So we might think of having some standard things that we recommend including. So maybe affected systems, specifically versions. We might want to have a CVSS score, I'm not sure. We might want to talk about, like, have them articulate the impact on the system in terms of the security properties rather than just kind of spitting out a finding. And one thing that's maybe a bit more controversial, but we could consider at least maybe including, is some suggestions or some norm setting, or at least like a discussion of when to release exploits. So, you know, would it be considered good practice to release an exploit on the day a patch goes out, or some guidance as to how to make that decision? Because like for us at NCC Group, for example, you know, sometimes we will release the exploit the day advisories go live, but sometimes we'll hold on to them for longer. And it's a bit of a nuanced decision. And I think maybe if we provided more of the, like, here's the things to think through when making this choice in an explicit way, that could be helpful.
Thank you. Excellent suggestion, Jennifer. And I missed a couple of the early notes of what things you wanted to put into the example of a report. So if you would like to, I have notes at the very bottom of the document.
Sure. Yeah, I'll add
Make sure I
some-
captured all your feedback.
I'll
Jonathan.
also put it in the agenda doc so we can cross-reference.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Just to dovetail off of that one, biggest suggestion that I wish I'd known beforehand, like, you know, I've done this long enough, I wish I'd learned this earlier, sort of thing. Write your disclosure for the public so that you don't have to rewrite it twice. So if you're the same disclosure that you're potentially going to use, one of the things I've learned is try to structure your disclosure to the maintainer such that that same information is the same information you can provide to the public, because then you don't have to write the disclosure twice, and then the end user, the public, gets the same information that you disclosed to the maintainer, and that saves a ton of time when you do the final public disclosure of your research. Other thing, vulnerability disclosure, disclosure timelines, like, you know, what are the standards? What are the norms around vulnerability disclosure timelines? You know, without getting into the topic of what's it called? Like ethical, without getting into ethics, like these are the norms, right? Like, you know, around like 90 days, 45 days, these are the research firms that use 45 days, these are the firms that use 90 days.
Excellent suggestion, sir. Jennifer, do you have a second question?
I do, but if there's anyone else with something to share, they can go ahead of me. All right. The other thing I was thinking as Jonathan was speaking as well was not just some guidance around timelines, but we could also consider tips for getting patches completed, written. So that was very inarticulate. Let me try again. Guidance we can provide around incentivizing or encouraging the creation of a patch by a maintainer. So something that I've found is very effective is to, and it tends to be like my last resort Hail Mary thing when people are being unresponsive or whatever, is to offer like, hey, can we have like a 15 or 30-minute phone call with you and we can talk through the vuln, we can talk through what the fixes look like, we can answer questions. So if we can give tips that, like, from our experiences we've learned have helped get patches into systems, that would be great as well.
Yes, good feedback, Jennifer. Jason asks, should we be targeting the personas at our GitHub repo? Yes, Jonathan, and we're focusing in right now on the finder and maintainer, but there's obviously a lot of additional work we could do. Talk about how suppliers might better work with upstream maintainers, or how suppliers could work with finders, or how everybody could work with coordinators. Yes, that's generally what's informing the focus of this particular project. Any other feedback, ideas, what we might want to incorporate into the guide?
Yeah, I mean, it might sound obvious, but if you could have guidance on how to recreate the attack and possibly avoid any sensationalization. There are a lot of attacks out there that really don't go into the attack, but are more like what ifs kind of deals. And those can be time wasters from a company perspective.
Well, and that information is super helpful to the maintainer so that they
Yes.
can reproduce it and validate this is or is not something of concern.
Yes,
That's an
exactly.
excellent suggestion. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love that, because maybe like when we think about norm setting in the bug report, one of the questions can be, do you have a proof of concept? Yes or no?
Other thoughts?
I mean, I guess another way we could get at what we might want to include in this could be thinking about the problems that researchers face. So are there other problems that we've not tried to solution yet? And could we outline what those are and maybe see if there's things we could put into this guide that would help mitigate some of those problems?
Yeah, let's might be a very good time to look at the security researcher pain point guide. Put a link there in the chat. So I had actually worked on this with Crystal from HackerOne a long time back. So you can see here, as a security researcher, I have problems understanding where and how to submit vulnerability reports to open source projects. Do you think that is something this guide could potentially address? Ava, question or comment?
It might be adjacent to this work, or it might fit really well within it. So I want to just ask the question. Sometimes when vulnerabilities are found, they are actually in lower level dependencies. There's a vulnerability in a service or an API or a project, but actually it's coming from a dependency of that or a piece of hardware that uses something like that. Possibly some guidance would help in those situations when the developer to whom the issue is reported then has to go coordinate with others under embargo to figure out how to do not just coordinating between the researcher and the developer, but then between the developer and other projects, companies, or firmware, if it has a kind of dependency. How do you approach that problem? I've seen that as a gap, and guidance would be super helpful.
Agreed. It's turtles the whole way down.
So many turtles.
Jonathan notes in the chat, making sure that you're reporting the vulnerability to the right place, trying to get it reported, fixed as close to the root cause as possible. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, what about having a database of companies and emails to reach out to? Usually it's pcert@company.com, but something the open source community go look at. I found something in XYZ. I go to this database and they know who to contact. I know it's not possible for everything, but
Disclose.io exists. That's more focused for companies, but that is what the goal of Disclose.io, that project, is kind of aiming towards. So maybe piggybacking on that existing database for this sort of use case could be useful.
Kayla, and then maybe back to Ava.
And so another possibly doesn't need to be stated, but I'm not sure topic would be if just calling out the difference between a bug bounty and vulnerability disclosure when it comes, especially in the world of open source. Like, just because you're disclosing this vulnerability does not mean that you're going to get paid for that. This is a vulnerability disclosure, and these are the difference of those. And just explaining what that means, just in case they're unaware.
Having given a talk about that at a conference just last week, I agree. That's a good point to add into this document. I think I saw Jennifer's hand next.
Maybe some guidance around validating the correctness of to whom you're reporting. So people that are claiming to be associated with a project that aren't, or we've come across a few examples in the last year or so of like fake maintainer emails for security bugs. And I don't know how hard or easy it will be to give anything too prescriptive, but maybe at least warning researchers, like, here's where you should probably consider to be like the authoritative book of record of things to communicate, and here's when it's probably a little bit sketchier.
I think we can certainly, just like in the original guide, we can just provide some guidance saying here is how typical, here's how some example projects are set up, here's how they are contacted, and how you can go in and check. That might be, and I agree with Ava, it might be a little too deep, but if you want to write it, I'll definitely accept it into the guide.
Be careful what you wish for.
Patch is welcome. Jonathan, did you have your hand up, sir?
I did. To tie into the topic of what is what's the difference between a bug bounty program and a vulnerability disclosure program, the pitfalls of unintentionally agreeing to a non-disclosure agreement when doing vulnerability disclosure, because you disclose. Take an example. I've disclosed vulnerabilities to companies, and you try to send a vulnerability report about an open source software, and you send them to an email, and then they say, great, thank you for sending us the email. Here's the HackerOne submission form that we have. And then you go and look at their HackerOne submission form, and the policy they have on their HackerOne submission form is a non-disclosure policy. And the vulnerability you're trying to report is in something that's open source, and it's definitely going to need a CVE. And how do you kind of navigate that around, like, hey, I want to disclose this vulnerability, but I also don't want to, I know that I can't be bound by an NDA in order to do so. How to navigate that. From experience, also happy to help with that with a pair writing session.
I saw Lorenzo had his hand up next.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, I would say this is extremely interesting, and as a newcomer, I just want to ask for my own understanding, because I've been skimming all this document as you were posting the links. Is there anywhere where there is a sort of a set of agreed upon goals or intended audience for this document? Because I was hearing people proposing many pieces, and as a newcomer, I have a bit of a hard time piecing everything together.
This is our very first time ever talking about this project as a group. So if we are interested in laying that out now, I'd appreciate that. Otherwise, I probably get stuck writing that down. Save my fingers from cramping. But that's definitely something we need to do, is to kind of scope out precisely who we're targeted at. And my impression is we're targeted towards the researchers at this point. But there's a lot of very heavily intertwined issues here.
That makes sense, because as I was hearing, I was thinking this is really ambitious, because there are so many like different use cases and different type of people.
I'm casting a wide net right now, and we'll get into editing and writing in the future. But that's not to say if there is an idea that's out of scope for this document that we couldn't reuse that for some other project down the road. All right, next up, I see Jason's hand.
Thanks. I've been kind of trying to figure out how to word this, but let's give it my best shot. So one of the things I was thinking about is kind of the softer and fuzzier aspects of vulnerability disclosure around, and I guess it's building a little bit on Jonathan's point about always consider the fact that it's going to be public and writing it public first. You know, one of the troubles I see a lot is the thing that gets circulated in the media is not the vulnerability disclosure. It's the first article that's written by the media outlet after the vulnerability disclosure. And those articles are often either wrong or warped. I was just reading a vulnerability, you know, there was a vulnerability thing I was reading that was floating around the lines yesterday. And I was like, this is completely bogus. And I went and looked at the disclosure. The person writing it had it all wrong. So just being as crystal clear as you can in the disclosure and writing it for kind of a newbie audience point of view type of thing. I don't know how we do that, but maybe like an example in the document or something like that. Example use cases, like one of the consumer personas is actually the media of disclosures, right? So just something I was thinking about.
And I think some simple instruction, or again, talking about standards and norms would definitely go a long way from helping desensationalize a lot of these situations. Just went through it last week. Other feedback about the ideas for the project.
Question. Sorry, I realized here I am trying to raise my hand and I've already unmuted myself, so I'm clicking around. Anyways, I realized that I would like to get some more feedback from teams, my teams around me. I know that that was something I should have been working on the past 2 weeks, but this has been a good guide to help me think structure through this and like how to think about it. So if we want to go back to our teams, go back to our networks, get more input, how should we contribute that input now at this point? What's the best way for us to give other ideas or other sections?
That is an excellent question, Kayla. For the other guide, we created a repo and would submit issues and PRs against that. Is that a tactic we'd like to take with this project? Do we want to stick in Google document? Do we want to use a whole pile of bar napkins and a Sharpie? How would we like to organize ourselves and collect feedback? Nikki.
I'm a big fan of the repo and the issues. I'm really glad that's the way you did it last time. That's before me, but that makes it really public, and lots of people who can't show up to this call can still participate, and you know, they don't have to deal with jumping through the Google hoops. So I'm a big fan of that, and it's super trackable too, which is something we really want, is that that transparency.
Any other thoughts about making a repo? I think it's a repo in a repo, or it could just be adjacent. I don't recall specifically. Would we like to follow that process like we did last time? Everyone fine submitting issues and PRs? Okay, so it sounds like that is how we will proceed. Mark a decision down. And so I will take the AR to take our feedback from today and try to see how it is organized. And then as we get that repository started, I'll put the outline there that we can start to chew on some more and potentially start adding to. Any questions or comments about that?
A quick one for the notes. So you're going to take the feedback and incorporate it into the doc, and then are you going to also create the issue? I'm sorry, I missed that while I was
Well, I'm
typing.
not a GitHubologist, but I can try my best. I will take the feedback from the notes and what is in the Google document or the guide right now, and I will try to synthesize that into a workable outline of topics. And then we can figure out mechanically how to get the repository up and running with the right rights. I might have to go ask Jen or Jory for assistance.
Okay, cool. I will just make note of that.
I don't
So
think
you're
I'm
not on the hook
powerful
for-
enough to make my own repository.
Ish. Yeah, I will make note of that so you're not on the hook for anything that you have not been given the keys to.
Yeah. And then I will also send this out into the mailing list. So again, feel free to respond there with additional feedback until we get that repository staged and ready to go. Any other items people would like to talk about today?
I wrote up a long thread like a year ago about like the pitfalls of vulnerability disclosure when I was chatting with people in the GitHub security lab group, and I'm trying to find that, because if I can find that, I'll send that off to you. So Rob, I'll send that to you. I mean, it's unfiltered and also like not necessarily available to just go public, but it'll give some like, I've done this before. Here are all the pitfalls that I had, boom, 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 and that I had it written up, but I just can't find it currently. So yeah.
Were you talking with Zav about that?
Yeah, and unfortunately, the GitHub security lab has a the Slack has like a you can't view messages before May 10th, 2021, and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd snagged that because I spent all that time writing it. Where is it now? So yeah, I just pinged him to see, hey, can I get access to that? Maybe potentially. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other items to discuss? So look for a barrage of emails from me about the charter, about the potentially moving the time, and then officially kind of kicking off this project. So I'll send out at least 3 mails to the list. Feel free to respond there or as issues as relevant. Like for the charter, we have an issue. Please comment there if you have strong feelings about it. And with that, I will adjourn us. I want to thank everyone for your time and participation today. Great conversation. Very excited about this new project. And our target release date is going to be early August to try to motivate us to run forward and do awesome things for the betterment of the community. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your days wherever you are. And we'll be talking very soon. Cheers.